Arkansas stole its first buggy in 1892. I met your grandma pig slopping in 46.
Oh, every Christmas we'd visit my Uncle Fred in prison.
And welcome, America, to America's Family History Show, Extreme Genes and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, on the program where we shake your family tree and watch the nuts fall out. Great to have you along, Genies. Incredible guests coming up today. One is involving an incredibly important conversation we all need to have at various times, and it's about planning the future of your family's past. And I'll have Marion Burke Wood on the show. She's written a book on that very topic, talking about how we preserve our heirlooms, our documents, our photographs, and make sure they get where we want them to go, so they'll get passed on to other people or enjoyed by people in archives. Plus, later in the show, we're going to talk to Dan Ford. He's known as the tie-dye genealogist. He's an ordinary person with an extraordinary find, and it's a perfect follow-up to Halloween, the story he's got for you. You're going to love it. Hey, if you haven't checked out our weekly Genie newsletter yet, get signed up on ExtremeGenes.com or on our Facebook page. You get a blog from me each week, links to great stories you'll be interested in as a genealogist, and of course, links to the show as well. And of course, through our brand new website, ExtremeGenes.com, you get an opportunity to sign up for video classes in starting genealogy and genetic genealogy, figuring out how to make those matches work for you. Right now, it's time to head out to Boston, Massachusetts, where David Allen Lambert is standing by, the chief genealogist of the New England Historic Genealogical Society and AmericanAncestors.org. Hello, David.
How are you, friend? I understand you had some big breakthroughs in your research recently.
You know, it's not too often you get a breakthrough after 39 years. But it happened finally. Yeah, my wife has had this second great-grandmother who has just been a mystery to us forever. She had a brother. They were both born in Ohio in Butler County in the 1830s and 40s. And unfortunately, this great-great-grandmother died in 1870. The brother died in 1880, too soon for death certificates that had the names of the parents on them. But they had a sister that had visited family members in Indiana in the 1900 census. And after that, she was gone, disappeared. Really common name, Martha White. Where did she go? She's not in Ohio. We can't find death record in Indiana. Where else do you go and still know that you found the right Martha White? Because the name's too common. So it occurred to me that this nephew she was visiting had moved to Michigan, where he died in 1933. So I thought, all right, I'll take a crack at that. And I found a great candidate, and as it turned out, this nephew was the informant on the death certificate, and it named both parents, the mother's maiden name, and I found the marriage record of these parents back in Ohio in 1820. So it was a huge thing, and it's still keeping me busy as I track back on her lines, the mother's side. And by the way, Dave, we confirmed the whole thing with 50 DNA matches to my wife's mother and uncle. So we know we got it right. Yeah, isn't that fun?
Your Christmas card list just got bigger.
Yes, it really, really did. So we've got some good news, though, for everybody in Family Histoire News to start off with.
We surely do. The Family History Library has now started moving into phase 2 for reopening. That means Saturdays starting this weekend, November 6th, open 9 to 5 on Saturday. If you've got some family history you want to do, go to the Family History Library right in Temple Square in Salt Lake City. And I will be there on the 13th, because that's when the NEHGS program ends, and I'm going to do some research myself. I changed my flight.
Nice. Very nice. Well, this is good news. It's great to see the library getting back to business.
Well, speaking of getting back to business, I hope that you had a nice Halloween, and sometimes stories that we find are fit perfectly for Halloween week, but I got a couple leftovers. This is a story from Noah Michelson, who didn't believe in the afterlife until he got a psychic that talked to him about his dead father and started passing messages on to him.
And these were messages, by the way, that were really specific, that this guy could not have looked up anywhere. It was just a gift. And I don't know. I have never gotten into psychic research for my genealogy. Have you, Dave? Have you ever had an experience?
Well, I was invited to go sit with a psychic probably about a dozen years ago. I'd never been to one before, and they did not know who I was, and they knew more about, I don't know, never been back again, because I hate to say it, freaked me out so much that they named my dead brother, and they mentioned about my parents and my nickname that only my dad would call. I'm like, where would they get that if they didn't get it from him? And I know I didn't ever put it out on a TV show or in the newsprint. Yeah, it's crazy.
I know.
So another Halloween-related story that kind of leaves you with an odd chill down your spine is John Wayne Gacy. Anytime you mention that mass murderer, it just gives you like a chill. But DNA search has actually identified one of his victims. This is a young man who died back somewhere between 1976 and 1977, was discovered on the property of John Wayne Gacy with another 29 individuals, and he wasn't identified till recently. I'm not a fan of tobacco personally, but a lot of people like chewing tobacco or smoke cigars, cigarettes. But the earliest use of tobacco has been located in Utah. And no, it wasn't discovered in the records of the Family History Library, but it was actually found on the West Desert on a U.S. bombing range. This dates back to 12,000 years ago, and essentially is a hearth that was found with the remnants of chewed tobacco seeds, essentially like chewing tobacco.
Wow.
And yeah, it's 9,000 years now earlier than the previous archaeological evidence. So who would have knew? It would have been right there in a bombing range. And now they can say that chewing tobacco is 12,000 years old.
That's crazy.
Well, that's all I have from this week. I'm going to be heading out to Salt Lake and talking to you all from Utah next time. And remember, if you're not a member of American Ancestors, you can save $20 on membership with the coupon code EXTREME on AmericanAncestors.org. Talk to you in a little bit.
All right, David. Yes, back for Ask Us Anything at the back end of the show. And coming up next in 3 minutes, we're going to talk to author Marion Burke Wood. She has written a book called Planning a Future for Your Family Past. It's an important book, an incredibly important topic, and we're going to kick that around coming up when we return in 3 minutes on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show.
Unknown parentage, lineage society membership, building your family tree, leaving a legacy. Regardless of your reasons for hiring a professional researcher, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you discover your family's past. Their genealogists are highly rated in their field with specialties in DNA analysis, historical context, and forensic genealogy. For nearly 20 years, Legacy Tree Genealogists have created thousands of professionally bound and digital reports for families like yours around the world. So whether you've hit a brick wall in your research or are just getting started, Legacy Tree Genealogists can help you tell your story and preserve it for generations to come. To receive a free estimate for professional research, visit legacytree.com or call 1-800-818-1476. That's 1-800-818-1476. We'd be happy to talk to you. Legacy Tree Genealogists.
Genies, Ancestry.com has just released an important new database, and it's free. It's the Freedmen's Bureau Bank Records and the Freedmen's Bureau Marriage Records. These records are a game changer for African American research. For the first time, searches for ancestors among these records can be done solely within these two databases, making discovery easier than ever before. Every name in these mostly post-Civil War records has been indexed. We're talking 3.5 million names, and they often include the names of parents, siblings, children, former slaveholders. They commonly provide ages, marriage information, and so much more. In some cases, you can read in their own words some of their stories as well as their post-emancipation ambitions and challenges. If you've been hesitant to seek out your African American ancestors because of the pre-1870 research challenges, now is the time to see what information is waiting for you right now for free. Only at Ancestry.com. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com. We are back on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth. And you know, one of the most important conversations we can ever have with our family members is who wants what? What do we do with our stuff? How do we plan for our family's past, right? And that's essentially the name of Marion Burke Wood's book. It's called Planning a Future for Your Family's Past. And Marion is a Connecticut woman. Great to have you on the show. Great book.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me, Scott.
There are so many questions that people would have about this because, as you know, over time, even if you're in family history for just a few years, you can accumulate an enormous amount of material, from videos to photographs to documents, heirlooms, all these things that come into play. And it's challenging over time when you start to look at how these pile up to determine exactly where all this stuff is going to go. And you've written a great book about it. Where do people start?
I think if you're trying to decide what should stay in your collection for you to bequeath or what should not stay in, think about 3 categories. Category 1 would be items like special heirlooms, original documents like your great-grandmother's birth certificate, things like that, that you think should be in your collection and then kept together with everything else you've got in family history documents. Category 2 are things that you don't have to have yourself, but you think should stay in the family. Maybe you've got wedding photos from a great-grandma or a great-aunt. Those could possibly go to a cousin or someone in the extended family. Then category 3 are things that don't have to be in your collection at all. You can give them away to a good home, not necessarily in your family, but perhaps to a historical society or a genealogical society, somebody who knows how to take care of those things and will keep them safe, preserved for researchers in the future.
Absolutely. You know, there's a real challenge, too, right now, because we are of the era where we're transitioning from a lot of the physical to a lot of the digital. I've spent an awful lot of time fixing up old photographs using Photoshop and MyHeritage's great tools and colorizing many of them. They've come out great, but we don't have originals of that unless I actually physically print these pictures. So I want to make sure those things are shared with people. But I think there is a tendency that descendants would be more interested in things that don't take a lot of their space, don't you think?
I agree. And in fact, there are some societies and museums, by the way, that will accept digital items for donation. So if you've got, as I had, my late father-in-law took thousands of slides, and most of them were not really useful for family history, but some of them showed historical places.
Mm-hmm.
And so I contacted some historical societies and museums and was able to donate those slides because they wanted to see what it looked like, let's say, in 1932 or 1927.
Sure. Wow, that's a great way to look at it. But, you know, as far as the descendants go, I would think just saying, okay, we're going to give you a Google Share folder or a Dropbox folder loaded with this material, and hopefully then if they see some pictures that they would like to turn into a physical photo for themselves to keep around the house, that's great. Otherwise, at least it's all kept together, and you can share it with more than one person that way.
That's a great idea, and I hope that everybody who's listening is captioning their photos digitally as well as perhaps in some physical format.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's so many new programs that are out that can help you with that as well. So let's go through this process. You talked a little about things that can go to the family, things that can stay with you. Because to me, it's like, there are a lot of things I've got. I don't want to give them away right now. I think I've got some years left. I would just as soon keep a lot of these things around that give me joy to have. But eventually, these things have to go someplace. So how do you keep track of what goes where? Are we talking about a will of some sort?
I do recommend that folks make a genealogical will, and there's a sample in the book. But whether you put it in will format or if you simply write a letter, you need to figure out what exactly is going to be left and to whom. So, for example, there are different heirlooms that are in my collection, but they're going to go to different people. So my late mother-in-law was a talented ceramicist, and she left a number of small sculptures of animals. Those are going to go to different folks. Maybe it's a grandchild who gets one, and maybe it's a cousin who gets another. But they're not just going to those people. They're going with a story. So I've been doing what you talked about just a few weeks ago. I photographed all these heirlooms, and I wrote the story. And those heirs already have a copy of the heirloom's picture along with the story. Mm-hmm. And now those stories are attached to the heirlooms and listed in my genealogical will. But I always have to ask permission to bequeath something more than one or two items. So I needed to ask permission to have my 36 archival storage boxes go to two different heirs who are going to take care of two different lines. If I don't ask permission, I don't know if someday when I join my ancestors in the far future, those people might not have the space or might not want the responsibility. So we do have to make sure that our heirs are willing and able.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I started that project some time back where I would take a photograph of the item and then I would put that story in it, and I would just do it on one page
right.
per photograph.
Right.
And, just turned it into a basic little book that has everything in it. And I'm finding I'm constantly running into things, particularly physical heirlooms, that people might not know what they are. I had this experience some time back where we found this crummy old coffee pot after we'd cleaned my mother's place out. And I had no idea where it came from. It obviously predated her. It was silver coated, and it turned out that she had left me a little list of things in a note that I found in a folder somewhere, and it mentioned this coffee pot, and it turned out to have been a wedding gift to my great-grandparents in Sweden in 1883. And
wow.
If I had not found that, I would have thrown that thing out as the piece of junk that it otherwise is.
You're making an excellent point. We need to tell folks in the family now what we have and what's the significance, because it might look like a piece of junk if we don't know there's a story behind it.
Absolutely true. I ran into a situation a while back as well, and I hear this story over and over again about people finding documents in the trash heap after somebody dies, right? I mean, how many family Bibles have we lost as a result of that, or important photographs or documents otherwise? And you think about that. When that happens, it means somebody really didn't make any plans for what was going to take place.
I sure don't want all my 23 years of hard work and these artifacts that I took time to preserve and that was important to my grandparents or great-grandparents. I want those things to stay in the family if the family wants them. The other thing, Scott, is that a lot of times people feel they don't have any heirs. They can't think of anybody who'd want their collection. But there's still things they can do now to plan ahead. So, for example, maybe you don't have kids, or maybe there's nobody left that you think of in your direct line, but you may have cousins who would be willing to take some or all of your collection, especially if there's something that shows their direct line. Mm-hmm. Then it might be an easy sell.
Yeah, exactly right. You think back on all the things that you gather over time. And I've learned over time, too, that what makes things attractive to people, what makes some of these items desirable, is how you display them. And sometimes they're just kept in plastic sleeves, acid-free sleeves in books. I've got a lot of those. But I also have little displays. For instance, I have musket balls from the battlegrounds of battles that my ancestors were in. Well, you're going to keep that little piece of metal rolling around in a drawer, unmarked. I have it in a little jewelry case with a display that highlights the ball and then its history right there in the jewelry case as well. Or you can create a shadow box like I did with my mother's badges that she got as a result of being in her high school band for 4 years. Every year they'd give her a new badge, and they weren't anything that you would understand what they were from or for, so I framed them all together with a photo of the band and a little note that went along with it. So it displays very nicely, it keeps them together, and people will know exactly what they've got. If you don't know what you've got, they often just go away.
You know, you make a good point. What you're saying to the folks who see these displays is this is something important to our family. This is something that's valuable enough to frame and save and tell people about. I like the way you're thinking about those artifacts.
Well, thank you so much, Marion. Your book is, by the way, just covers so much ground that we can't even touch it today. But let's go through some of the chapters here just so people understand. You've done a couple of editions of this as well. So you talk about organizing storage. You talk about organizing photos and images and movies. Boy, that's important stuff. Organizing digital files. This can be really tricky because, as we know, technology isn't always our friend late in life. And so it's really important to, I would say, engage some of the younger family members in helping you to organize that. And perhaps in the process, they'll become a little more interested in what you've got.
Great idea.
Then we've got a chapter on inventorying and indexing your collection. That could be a little time-consuming, but really important once again. Family artifacts, keep or give away, like we've talked about. This list goes on and on and on. It's a terrific book. It's available on Amazon. You can also go to AmericanAncestors.org to their library. The Newberry Library in Chicago, their bookstore, has copies of it as well. The name of the book is Planning a Future for Your Family's Past. The author is my guest, Marion Burke-Wood. And Marion, thank you so much for your time. This is absolutely fabulous. Very important conversation. And your book, I think, is a source of terrific ideas.
Thank you so much, Scott, and I want to remind the audience, if there's one thing you do for your heirs, caption those photos so that 100 years from now, they'll know what great-great-great-great-grandma and great-great-great-great-grandpa looked like.
Well said. Thank you so much, Marion. And coming up next, another ordinary person with an extraordinary find. It's kind of like an extension of Halloween, this story. Wait till you hear it. It's coming up in 5 minutes on Extreme Genes. Back at it on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and ExtremeGenes.com. It is Fisher here, your radio root sleuth, and I always love hearing ordinary people with extraordinary finds and how they found them. And I've got one of those on the line right now. It's Dan Ford. He calls himself the tie-dye genealogist. I love the name, Dan. Where'd you get that?
From wearing tie-dye to enough genealogy conferences that it became a recognizable trademark.
Very nice. Well, tell us your story. You've got a great one here, going back to the immigration from the potato famine.
I was researching my second great-grandmother, whose entire family came over in 1849 because of the famine. And in particular, I was researching her brother, William. They settled in Massachusetts. I was researching him because you always do that with the siblings of your primary ancestor. Came across his death certificate that said burnt by fire.
Oh, wow.
So I dug in more to him. Earlier in his life, he joined the Civil War, served 2 tours, and gotten married in between the 2 of them. Had been seriously wounded. He did finish serving, but he had a head wound, and it kind of left him not all right. Later in life, he was underneath a ward. The town clerk would manage his money. So the newspapers had a lot of coverage on this. So that was great to try to track down how he got burnt by that fire. And it was quite the story because this gets graphic. He was brutally murdered, and apparently the fire was to cover it up. They were only able to ever find his torso, his body. His head had been cut off. All his limbs had been cut off.
Oh.
He was found in the basement of his house next to the stove.
This is like a carryover from Halloween.
And yeah, and they found that he was lying on top of a bloody axe.
Oh, dear. Wow.
So we kind of have the cause of death. The story that the locals saw, though, was that they woke up Sunday morning and the house is on fire. In the middle of the night at 3 a.m., the house was on fire. So they go over there. Eventually, they find the body in the basement. So the expectation is that it was a murder and the house was burned to cover it.
Sure.
The suspects are really fascinating in this story. Even though this guy who's in his 50s and not all quite there had just relatively recently moved to town, he'd become really friendly, apparently, with the neighbor's sisters. And he had given them the deed to his house.
Okay.
Theory is that he had asked for it back, and that's why they were going to kill him.
There seem to be many motives potentially here, right? I mean, because if a guy's off a little bit, you would think then he might, frighten somebody. They might consider him a scary individual.
In fact, that literally happened. They reconstructed his last day. He had gone to the town clerk, got a few dollars, $8 to $10, gone to another town, paid some bills, then gone out drinking, come home, got in a fight with somebody. And all that was covered in the inquest, but they decided the fight guy was just normal fight.
Okay.
He also may have even proposed to one of the women. Well, he invited her up to his place.
Uh-oh.
But she wouldn't do that while he was married. Remember, he got married during the Civil War.
And she was still living then.
Yes, he never divorced her. So now you're starting to build up this motive. And yes, he had just filed for divorce. And as a matter of fact, the divorce case was going to be heard in 4 days.
Okay. Wow.
So 15 years after separation, decades after having been married, only now he decides to file for divorce. So something's going on there. Largely, the newspapers portrayed the sisters as the main suspect. But, you can make a case for the wife because she was about to lose everything. She was going to inherit this guy's sizable amount of money eventually. He had a sizable pension from the Civil War. He had a lot of money from his inheritance. And so the wife had been expecting to inherit all this. And when she found out she was going to get divorced and the house had already been given away, maybe she lost it.
Wow. But you wouldn't think she'd be the one, though, wielding the axe, right? You'd think she'd bring somebody in because that sounds like something that would take a stronger person.
Yeah, I have other axe events in my family tree, and they're usually males.
Yes, usually. Now, there aren't a lot of Lizzie Bordens out there.
So they did all of the investigation they could. They actually exhumed the body twice.
Oh,
so he had 3 burials. So they could re-examine the cut marks and things like that. Very thorough, but months later, they had the inquest, and the judge ruled it was murder, but they never found out who. So the sisters were not charged. No one was ever charged. However, here's the final thing. During probate, after the inquest, it turns out the executor found out that the town clerk had been embezzling from William.
Oh, no. This just keeps getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah, the guy who had access to all of that money. Yeah, you wouldn't want to rob the poor Irish guy in the street. He's not carrying much cash. So the executor sued the town clerk to get the money back. That, I think, puts him back on the suspect list for the original murder. Because if he had been discovered as having been embezzling accounts, who knows?
That's amazing. So let's go through some of the sources that you dug this all up with. You had the death certificate that read burnt by fire, but it wasn't really all that because apparently there was an axe involved with it. Then you've got the newspaper stories that are there. You probably, of course, found the marriage record, and then you found the divorce information in there. And then, of course, he inherited this money, so that must have been in some of the probate. And when you looked into the extended family, am I missing something here?
Well, I also got a copy of his Civil War pension file. That included a lot of details of his wounds. When he was injured, he was treated at a particular hospital, and I researched that specific hospital. And I found a diary from one of the nuns who worked there at the same time. So I have a first-person description of the hospital where he recuperated. Most of this, though, after he died, was newspapers. Mm-hmm. The death certificates were amended several times. So there's revised death certificates.
Wow. I am just amazed. That is a whole lot of stuff to go through. And so what happened with the wife? At the end of all this, the divorce didn't go through. Did she end up inheriting everything that she was expecting?
You may not like this part of the story, but I didn't do that. I don't know.
You don't know yet? Well, is the research into a story like this really ever done anyway, right? That's the other point.
Oh, yeah. This touches on so many aspects of the life. While he was alive, he moved around. I had to use city directories to track him down.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, 1896 was his date of death. And central Massachusetts, they have pretty good records.
Yeah, they do.
So I did get lucky, relatively speaking, in being able to pull this stuff together.
Well, you've pulled together an amazing story there, and I'm sure one that's probably resonated throughout your family ever since you found it, yes?
They love it.
It's fascinating, but you hate to hear that somebody went through such a miserable life when serving his country and trying to do his part during the Civil War, and comes to such a horrible end, coming to America, the land of hope, and ends up this way. I mean, it's really quite tragic, but when you get that far away from something, I think we disconnect a little bit, and suddenly it becomes like a mystery novel that we read as opposed to something that truly happened to a human being,
Yeah. I mean, it certainly wasn't a happy life. He wasn't poor. He had a couple of lady friends.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't lonely.
It could have been worse.
Yeah. Yeah, but he was driven to America by starvation. Then he winds up in a war. Then he gets wounded. So now he doesn't have all his mental faculties. He's got money. He's got companionship. But then he gets brutally murdered. I mean, what a tale.
The other aspect that came through was their investigative techniques, because the police really had difficulty doing certain things. They determined time of death based on stomach contents, because at least they had a stomach. The police techniques come through, too, in the newspapers.
Amazing. He is Dan Ford. He's the tie-dye genealogist in Cupertino, California. Appreciate the time, Dan. Thanks for sharing.
Happy to, Scott.
And coming up next, David Allen Lambert returns for another round of Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show. Hey Genies, it's Fisher here, and my shiny new ExtremeGenes.com website has been described as having that new car smell. I love hearing that. Having been with you for over 8 years now, it felt like time to help out listeners and followers who need to know the basics of genealogical research, as well as how to understand your DNA test results, and to be able to put them to work for you, breaking down brick walls, identifying birth parents, locating new cousins who may have photos and information that can't be found anywhere else, and verifying your paper trails. Yes, DNA can do all that, and I can show you how. Check out the all-new ExtremeGenes.com website and download the free Genealogy Strategy Roadmap and the free DNA Starter Guide. Then, if you like what you see, you can take those next steps to sign up for the video courses that you can watch at your leisure. I'll take you through all the basics, step by step. Find out more now at ExtremeGenes.com. Anytime is a great time to learn more about your family. Did you miss Roots Tech Connect this year? It's not too late to experience Roots Tech classes, keynotes, and how-to content. Just visit rootstech.org to see what you missed and to experience Roots Tech Connect on your own timetable. Select inspiring and insightful messages that will help you in your pursuit to connect with and share your family story in new ways. You can then use the free resources found at FamilySearch.org or the Family Search Family Tree app to have a deeper personal experience getting to know your family, past and present. Connecting with family and learning about your ancestors provides healing, peace, and a sense of belonging. And it's easy to share what you learn with others to help and inspire them as well. Visit rootstech.org for some inspiration or visit FamilySearch.org to continue on your journey of family discovery today. All right, Genies, the masks are off, libraries and archives are opening up, and in part because of the pandemic, there are more records online than ever before. That means more opportunities for you to discover your ancestors and piece together their stories. Hey, it's Fisher, and if you haven't joined the official Extreme Genes Facebook group, Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies, there's never been a better time. Here's your chance to visit online with like-minded Genies. This is the place for exchanging ideas on new sources, databases, DNA, and, well, strategies. Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies got a whole bunch of genies through the pandemic and will only be better now that things are opening up. It's a great online community that gets better still when you become a part of it. Remember, sometimes it only takes one tip or idea to get your family research where you want it to go. Since it costs you nothing to sign up, why not join us? Genealogy and Family History Breakthrough Strategies. All right, David is back, and it's time once again for Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. And David, our first question today comes from Pam Hollings in South Carolina, and she says, guys, I've always been told that my great-grandfather was Native American. Would any of his records help me to verify that? David.
Well, that would probably put you into the time frame of the 13th U.S. Census. Back in 1910, there's actually a special little schedule that they did that actually gives you percentages of what Native American ancestry you might have.
Really?
Now, that's only as good as, it's only as good as the person giving the information, mind you, but it is a place to start. So say, for instance, you had a small town in Connecticut or Massachusetts or even Nevada, and you had a small family of Native Americans or people who claim to have Native American blood. They would be in the regular census, and it would go into their nativity, whatever their race was, for the whole community. And then if you were Native American, there was a special schedule at the end of that enumeration. And it would ask you the tribe of your father, the tribe of your mother, and then it would ask you what proportion you were Native American for each one of those tribes. If you were Oneida Indian, or Massachusetts Indian, or Pequot Indian, whatever the case might be, it would put down that you're half this or a quarter that. It would also ask you other questions, obviously where you were born. It asks where your mother and father were born. So if they were born on a reservation, you might get that. You also get the occupation listed in there and their education. So you're getting a lot of the whole scope of the family story. So it's a great census, but there's other things. Death record. The death record of an individual may say their race is Native American. The marriage record and the birth record.
But it sounds like that 1910 record is really essential. So if you're lucky enough to have an ancestor on that line who falls over that 1910 census, you may be in luck.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't look for that last schedule at the end of the census. So they technically are listed twice. So if you find your ancestors listed twice in the 1910 census, it may be a possibility you may have Native American. But again, you have to find that separate schedule at the end.
But let's not forget about DNA, David. I mean, that would be the key. If you're just trying to find out, yes, you have Native American blood, or no, you don't, that would be the best way to go. It's very reliable for that. And then you put in the records that you've been talking about. Then you can get more of the specifics.
That's true. And so it helps when you've got the names of tribes based on a census or, a vital record or even obituary. It might give you that clue. But when you have the DNA, it's not going to tell you specifically what tribe it is.
Right.
But it does help. But when you have a story of a Native American in the family back in the 1600s, you may not have the autosomal DNA left over to test to find that marker.
Sure.
But Y-DNA mitochondrial, if it's on the direct male line to the direct female line, sure, that will help too.
And I would think from the 19th century, you'd have a much better shot at the autosomal test revealing something. And if you had like a percentage, and for instance, from that 1910 census that somebody was 25% Native American, you might then be able to go to the grandparents of your great-grandparent and discover which person that was, and then start to research them individually. And all the people in between, for that matter, wherever it is, depending on the percentages. So do the math and figure it out, and then go back through those particular lines and see if you can identify who the individual or individuals might be, and you may be on your way. It's a great question, Pam, and good luck in your journey on that.
It's interesting. When you look at family history, the oral tradition seems to last the longest, but I've had people with Native American fish that didn't realize they were Native American, and records are the thing that revealed it, or DNA.
Thanks, Pam, for the question. And, of course, we got another one coming up when we return on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, in 3 minutes. All right, last time through, it's Ask Us Anything on Extreme Genes, America's Family History Show, and extremegenes.com. David, our next question comes from Rachel Wald in Independence, Missouri, and she says, Fish and Dave, what do you suggest as projects that can get my kids interested in our family history? This is a good question, and we've talked about this before, and I'll start out, Dave, because you suggested many years ago, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, this idea about an ancestral coin book. And you had a little experience with your daughter because the coin had a date from when her great-grandmother was born. And
That's
so
right.
I took it to the next level and got a ringed notebook and started basically putting coins in little sleeves with pictures of ancestors born in the years on the coins. And my grandkids went nuts for that ancestral coin book.
Oh, yeah. That was the same thing I was doing. And then it got to the point that if I was getting coins from the 1600s, it was going to cost me a kidney. So I decided that it had to be a cheaper route. So one of the other thoughts that I had, and I haven't started it yet, but it's something you can start now and continue on. How about buttons? Everybody has old clothes. Save a button from Great Aunt Tessie's wedding dress, or maybe your great-grandfather in World War I, his uniform button or something like that was in your mom's sewing kit. I think that we could probably take and ask family members, hey, save me a button. I mean, now, of course, we live in the world of, hey, give me your DNA sample. But that could be the way to kick open the door. It's tactual for kids, especially the young ones, to see different colored buttons and things like that. Everybody has old clothes they're giving away, so tear a button off, save it and send it in. Maybe the family genealogist and the junior genealogist might find a fun way of connecting that, no pun intended, to their family tree.
But, I think really what we're talking about here is anything physical from an ancestor, I think, is a great way for kids to connect to those people because it makes them real, right? I have I have a little badge that my grandfather wore as a drummer boy with a GAR outfit in 1890 in New York City. And I have a picture of him wearing that badge as a 10-year-old. And so that's a special thing. And then we have these badges that I mentioned earlier in the show, these little pins that went to my mother for participating in school band in the orchestra. It was a marching band in the 1930s and 40s. So we've matted and framed those and kept those together. And when you do that and put it in a way that's presentable to people to make them understand that these are things that connect them to the ancestors, it seems to make a difference.
It does, because you can put stuff in an envelope and say this belonged to your grandmother. But I think really what you've done with the displays are great. Those shadow boxes, or just matted with a photograph and have a little cutaway in it. I mean, there's lots of ways of doing this to be creative. Even a family photo tree where the kids aren't going to want to read all of this life story. And maybe the kids can't even read yet, but they want to know who their ancestors are. Save these photographs you have and make a collage, family photo faces that people can point to, and then you tell them a story.
And they also have those playing cards now that you can put ancestors' faces on. And then on the back, little bullet points with information about them, when they were born, when they died, where they lived, did they serve in the Civil War, whatever it might be. And I've done those for my grandkids as well, and they really enjoy getting to know their ancestors in that way. So, there are lots of ways, really, that you can stimulate interest from your kids, but it seems to always really mostly evolve around two things: physical stuff like this and stories. Not just the names and the dates in the tree, but the stories.
Well, when I was 7, that tin-type photograph, a metal photograph, got a 7-year-old interested, and that's why he's on the phone with you today.
That's it. All right. Good question. Thank you, Rachel. And David, thanks so much for coming on again, and we will talk to you again next week.
All righty. See you soon.
All right. And that's our show for this week. If you missed any of it or you want to catch it again, of course, listen to the podcast on Apple Media, iHeartRadio, extremegenes.com, TuneIn Radio, and Spotify. Talk to you again next week. And remember, as far as everyone knows, we're a nice, normal family.